If I'm becoming Bart Simpson, something doesn't work.
I
need
like
to
that.
know what's going on. I don't need micromanagement. I don't need to know what you're doing every minute.
Welcome back to Emphasis Tech Talks, the podcast for business leaders leveraging cutting-edge technologies to raise their bottom line. I'm your host, David Clausen of Emphasis Tech. Our guest today is Arik Yelovitch, CTO at Delos Insurance. This episode has a lot to unpack, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'll visit with Arik about their use of AI, and he'll tell us about different roles for a startup and the critical nature of project management in the insurance tech space. Hey, Arik, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate you being on. I saw in the bio, in the LinkedIn bio, when it talks about Delos, and it talked about preventing forest fires. So tell me, how is Delos using tech to help achieve your goal of preventing forest fires?
So thanks for having me. So we're not exactly preventing forest fires. We are more able to ensure homeowners and homes by nature that are doomed to risky from wildfire perspective in the regular admitted industry, the insurance industry. For instance, if State Farm or Progressive or any of them deem it too risky, then the consumer has two options in California. They either go to the FAIR plan, which is a state-sponsored plan, which is not the greatest insurance. Since it's going live, I don't want to start talking ill about a coverage that exists, but let's say it's not. It's the last resort.
It's considered a last resort, right? I mean, the state, that's, in Oklahoma, we have that for work comp, and, we have a last resort place to go. And
Exactly. So every state has this last resort, right? Florida has it in hurricanes, and so every state has this last resort, but it really needs to be last resort. In the California market, it became not a last resort, and it blew up like beyond proportion. So if something, God forbid, really happens in California, I don't know who's going to foot the bill. So I really hope we won't get there. But what happens is the consumer has this option of going to the FAIR plan, which is not the greatest coverage. It's very expensive. It's a kind of like coverage which can exclude fires. So it's not the greatest product for consumer perspective. So this is exactly where Delos comes in the surplus. So once the admitted carriers don't accept the risk, we're coming in and assessing the risk ourselves. So we have a unique and proprietary algorithm that basically understands better than any traditional algorithm that the traditional carriers use, and we're able to distinguish is this area, this specific geographical location, latitude and longitude, is really risky. We're taking into account more than 200 data points, and the more I talk to our chief data science, which is Andrew, which is super smart guy. I wish I had half the wit that he has. The more I learn about it, like the effect of salt in the air, the effect of how much fuel in the ground, and we see it, the effect of the slope, and sometimes being lower point is even more riskier than being on the upper point. Like we are used to fire going up, right? It's going uphill, kind of like we saw along the movies, right? It keeps hill. But fire also behaves differently in high temperatures. When the temperature is super high, it starts to behave like liquid, like lava. So instead of going up with the flames, it started to really flow down, like literally flow down. So we're able to assess all these things and able to say, okay, what's the actual risk of this specific location? And it doesn't matter if there's a house there, if there's a school there. We assess the actual risk for this specific location, right? And then on top of that, we can start mitigate, okay, does the house has all kind of mitigations? If they have they have a 1 mile or 500 feet of fire barrier, do they have fireproof windows? Basically, fireproof means that nothing can go in through like all kind of burned leaves and stuff like that. Is the roof foolproof for that, or is it going to catch fire in 2 seconds? So then coming all kind of mitigation, which is the next step for Delos as well to go really into it. But basically, when you think about it, Delos is, yes, it's an insurance company, insurance MGA, but we're also giving service to people who up until this point couldn't get insurance. If you can't get insurance in the homeowner space, you most of the time you can't get a loan. If you can get a loan, you can buy the house, and it spins around. Or if you can get the fair plan, it's a very expensive insurance. If something, God forbid, happens, you're not covered for your loss. So you end up with burnt house and nothing to show for. You don't have the money to build a new house. The insurance purpose is to make you whole again, right? Something happened, God forbid, I get the money for it, and I'm able to recover from it because the land is the land, right? It's mine. But the problem is mostly with, okay, how do I rebuild my house? And we all know that our house is our fortress. It's a known saying. And if someone had a burglary and someone got into your house, you feel violated. So think about if your house is destroyed. Suddenly you're like, okay, oh God, what am I doing now? Or, even damage there, it's a nightmare. So that's what Dell's coming to give a service. Now, some of the data we use is used by Cal Fire as well, only we have a bit more layers than Cal Fire, and they use it to prevent fires, to control the fires, and to basically understand how the fire will behave. And that helps Cal Fire as well.
Wow. So, well, I got to think that there's a lot of folks out there in the Texas Panhandle that are looking forward to your services, right? So, after all the fires earlier this year, over 1 million acres that got burned up
Over a
there?
million, I guess, in Texas and Oklahoma, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Well, the data. So, data is critical to that effort. Do you have? So, I'm assuming you're gathering a lot of different data from different disparate data sources. Is that a good assumption?
Yeah, we gather data from a few vendors, but our IP is basically we use Google Earth, and on top of that, we have a think tank that have their propriety, and they basically sign a contract with us that you can use it commercially, and we're adding on top of that our own propriety, and we basically build the models on top of that. So the model itself was developed by a group named SIG, which is super smart people that into the climate arena, and they serve a lot of groups. But we took their model and made it commercial. And on top of that, we extended it to the point that we, up until now, touch wood, we have about 99% success in predicting. Now, like some people will say, hey, it's easy to predict based on the past because you know what happened, right? If we knew that if everything will be based on the past, everybody would be rich in Wall Street. But what we do to try to simulate these things is we're actually taking maps that we're taking our algorithm based on a map from 6 years ago, from 7 years ago, and we put, for instance, Paradise. Remember the campfire in California. And this whole area got such a high score that it almost jumped out of the map. And all these areas that actually burned during the last 10 years, we would not insure these areas. And it continues so. So, there's no guarantees in life because things happen, weather changes and stuff. But overall, we're quite accurate on that prediction.
So, share with our audience maybe some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in putting all this together, and kind of how you did that. How did you overcome those challenges?
So there are two challenges, main challenges. One is the technology as being a CTO for solving it, and the second one is the insurance itself. The insurance industry as a whole got burned, literally, by these all the wildfires. And not, Texas is a small bit because Texas, with all the size that happened there, mostly was uninhabited. A lot of cows died, so that's a lot of agriculture insurance which will be involved. But overall, from property damage and lives, it wasn't that much. That's why most of them let them burn because the resources of taking it out would be much more expensive. And then it's economy, right? It's all a better ROI. In California, it's a bit different because of the housing market there and everything. Historically, Californians try to find cheaper and cheaper houses, and the way to do it is go outside the cities and into forests and into places that humans didn't live before. And what happens in these habitats, fires happen, and that's part of the life cycle. Now, what happened in the last 10 years, and you can look like the campfire and the dry lightning fire in the Bay Area, and not to mention LA area and stuff like that. There are tons of fire because of the drought that was there and because of other phenomena. And the damage that was done to the insurance industry was lost. They basically lost billions, and they started to pull out. So once they started to pull out, everything became more expensive with the consumer. The second thing for us as a company was, as a young company that presumes to have the best algorithm in the world, you don't have much experience. You have it like simulated, but you don't have proof, right? We didn't write us too many policies. We need to prove ourselves. How do you find this first underwriter, first carrier, first capacity in insurance? Because we're an MGA, we don't take the risk. That would put this trust in us and enable us to write business, so we can kind of prove ourselves, right? It's catch 22. How do we prove ourselves and get enough trust in order to sell and prove ourselves?
For our audience, so the MPA, that's a program administrator, right? Within,
MGA, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
MGA is a manager general agency.
right. So that's kind of effectively like a wholesaler within the insurance industry.
Yeah, you can say that. It can be, it's a, yeah, it can have its own agent. We can sell through other agents. We are basically the licensed broker in this case. We have the license, and home site are not exposed to the customer at all. They have their own license, but we take care of all the sales and everything. We take care, most of the time, MGAs take care of the underwriting, the rates, and the carrier capacity usually just bring their paper and terms. That's usually the relationship in that domain. So as I said, the homestead, luckily for us, picked up that ball and enabled us to start writing. And with my help, we developed. When I joined, we were writing about $4,000 in policies, in premium per day, and with a carrier that we got to capacity and stopped writing. And we built a whole automated system for agents to be able to quote and bind without picking up the phone. And today we are already north of $6 million a month in premium customer base, which is growing. And part of it is because, again, we're selling in places that naturally unadmitted carrier shouldn't write. But since there's nobody there, everybody comes to us, which is great for us. I wouldn't say amazing for the consumers, but they still get a good product. It's a bit more pricey, but it is what it is. I would love them to get a half the price product, but they're still getting something. So at least that.
Well, you would think over time, if if that experience that you've had so far continues to prove out, that eventually they may be able to lower some of the prices on policies that are written through your program.
Yes and no, in a sense. Yes, you're right. We can understand the risk and price it better, so it will lower. But on the other hand, in the non-admitted market, there is less appetite to lower the price, because if you came to us, that means you couldn't find it anywhere else. So I'm not saying you'll be able to pay whatever you want, but we competing with a fair plan in a sense, and less with the admitted market. So if State Farm comes and tell you I have a $1,500 policy, and I'm coming and tell you I have a $3,000 policy, and the fair plan comes and say I have a $4,000 policy, I'm not competing with State Farm. If State Farm lets you do that, go to State Farm. That's how you should do it. You shouldn't come to us if you can find a policy with State Farm. But if you came to us, you're riding with us. Fair plan is the next stop, and it's $4,000. So, and we give you better coverage. So it's kind of the market conditions. So as much as I would like to lower prices, we kind of also taking much more risk in that aspect, because we do, we hope algorithm is correct, but we do take more risk in that sense.
Yeah, I got it. So how big is Delos, and how big is your IT department?
So the IT department, the tech is 5 people, including myself. I started myself 2.5 years ago. I was the sole contributor. I didn't write that much code since my days at Hippo back in 2017. So I have like 8 years experience in the Insuretech industry. And bit by bit, I recruited three engineers, and a PM that guided me through the way that was already in Delos. So as I said, this is the stack, right? 4 engineers and 1 PM, and a data science department, which is not exactly part of engineering, but Andrew is chief of science, so I'm not considering it part of IT. Delos and Hall is about 20 people, so we're running a very, very slim operation. And that's a major difference between what happens now in the new Insuretech, what we call Insuretech 2.0, to what was with Hippo, Lemonade, Root, that they actually built big organizations that were they didn't have that much tech back then. Like, for instance, the policy management system. and didn't there wasn't anything almost out of the box back in the days. I'm talking days, it's 2017, 2016, 2017. So you had a whole department of tech that just need to build that. We had 5 engineers just building that, and at the end, when I left, there were about 15 engineers that maintained it and continue developing it. Nowadays, you can basically buy it, so you need less engineers to do stuff that are not in your core business. So for my core business, that's enough. I don't need more.
Yeah, that's no. If you get too big, and I can tell you, we have a number of really large clients as well as a number of small ones. But in the large ones, as those teams grow, the communication challenges are everywhere. And there's a lot of extra time spent, in unproductive efforts, just through meetings and documentation and so on. So yeah, in a lot of scenarios, that smaller group does help a lot. Do you also bring in some outside resources, maybe for a special initiative or something of that nature, to fill in your team?
We brought some students here and there to handle operations. So the thing is, like, I love the example our head of operations said. Everybody likes the elephant in the circus, right? Everybody comes to see the elephant in the circus, which is the front of the circus. But then you, excuse my language, have to clean the shit behind the scene. And you don't never have enough operation people because you need to bring the crowd in, right? That's the goal of every startup. Bring the crowd in, and then who takes care of everything else? So we had to put bodies on the problem before we had the time to start automate it, because first automation was about how you sell, bind, service the policy. And now you're coming to, okay, compliance and communication and all these things in the beginning had to be done manually, but you don't want to hire people for that, right? It's a very short-term role. So we brought out extra help and students and interns to help cover that gap until we have automation.
So, are there any is there any advice that you might give to our audience about bringing in outside help like that to help on specific initiatives?
Yeah, so for my 20 years experience in the market, there's always the question of does the technology solves everything? And the other question is, does it worth the price of it solving everything? So to answer the first one, yes, technology solves most of things. I wouldn't go everything. I wish it did. My life would probably be different. I would probably live in a mansion in Texas and wouldn't worry about anything. But it solves most of things. Does it worth to have a technology solution for everything? The answer is no. I think a good entrepreneur, CTO, or technologist knows where to swallow your pride and tell guys, this doesn't worth it. I can solve it. I can create an amazing solution. But here's an Excel spreadsheet. And if you put a $20 an hour person there that does that for 6 hours a day, here's the cost, right? $120 a day. If I'm putting my resources, that's $150,000 of resources. Do the cost analysis. So I think my advice for small startups, we don't have endless cash in their piggy bank, and most of them don't, is make sure that you're solving something that is later on be able to scale, and it needs to be scaled now. So if I can put a person behind it for the next half year while I'm concentrating on bringing customers in, I'll put a body on the problem in half a year, and that's what we did. I'm going to automate the hell out of it, but I don't need to do it now. I prefer to work on the mainstream and get the revenue in, so I'll have the money to spend and hire another engineer to automate it at scale, because I don't need it for 2 policies. I need the automation for 100 policies.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're just saying do those IT spends, those development spends, uh, at the right appropriate time, and that may be later rather than earlier, depending on the scenario. So yeah, that's good advice.
Exactly. And there is sometimes low-tech solution for high-tech problems. And we have to remember there's enough tools there, and Excel is an amazing tool that can solve a lot of issues for you. We work with spreadsheets for half a year before we even move to some other things. It works. It's a very cheap solution. It comes free with Google or Microsoft if you have it, and it works.
Right. A lot of businesses are running largely on Excel, no doubt. Now that can become for certain organizations, that can become an issue at some point when you've got business decisions being made on data coming from Excel files that are being manually updated. And especially if you have a single point of failure, meaning one person's the only one that knows how to do the entry and how to update that. So just there's a balance. I think what I'm hearing from you is there's a balance here between the monies that's spent and the manual part of the kind of operations and so forth. So I get that. So tell me about your talent on your team. Obviously, if you're that small of an IT department, the folks that you have to be talented and often wear multiple hats. How do you recruit and keep those talented team members?
I think I was, thank God, lucky, and I think that's $1 million question, right? You have a small team, everybody has multiple hats, as you mentioned, rightfully so. So I'm a backend engineer, so in my origin, and that's what I'm doing. I know nothing about web. I can fix misspells and stuff like that with find replace. That's about where I draw my limit. So the first thing that for me is like I can do backend, but I need help with front end. So for first thing for hiring for me, excuse me, was to find a good web developer, and that's through references. So someone you know, and I believe in always try to start with a contractor. The reason is because you interview people and they sound great on interview, but you need to let them run with you, see that the chemistry is right there, the understanding is there, and it's much easier to, and it's a cruel world, but it is what it is. It's much easier to say goodbye to a contractor from legal perspective, from any perspective, than to say goodbye to an employee. One state is easier than other, but generally speaking. And you also want to be able to, and you want to be able to assess. I always give an example. You wouldn't marry your wife after 3 dates. Nobody would, except maybe it's a match. But I'm talking the free market. You wouldn't marry your wife after 3 tries. You go and date, and then you usually move together, and then usually the wedding comes, right? So it's kind of like that. You date, that's the interviews. You live together, that's the contracting for 2, 3 months, and then you marry, right? Then they get the offer. So that I believe it's the best process that I find out about. Like again, it's not always easy. It's not always visible, especially in big companies. But in small startups, where the budget for FTE or for contractors coming from the same pool, it's very easy to manage. And most founders prefer it because then they don't have to give up shares right from the beginning and don't have to allocate shares. So what I did with my 2 web developers, I got a recommendation about one. I hired him, and then he brought the other one. And from the backend engineer, I had an amazing backend engineer in the beginning, which again, everybody started a contractor. Then he had to leave for the personal reasons. I hired another one, which in the court, like when we lived together, actually didn't work well, unfortunately. And still, you're wasting resources, right? At the end of the day, 3 months is a lot of resources you spend to educating and teaching, and it's also 3 months that you didn't look for anybody else. So if I have to look for anybody, someone again, I'm wasted 3 months of my life. So and unfortunately, that didn't work. And then we found another developer from Florida, and he's working amazingly. He got into the hang of it in a second and became an FT quite quickly. And again, I'm lucky. The team knows how to handle it. They're coming to me for all the big things. I know insurance very well, so I'm kind of guiding them towards that. The insurance tech industry is tech are tech. They know to develop, they know to do stuff. They don't know compliance, don't know the places they need to avoid and they're where the pitfalls are, which I fortunately know most of them. Again, not everything, and I'm learning as I go, but I know a lot of them, so I'm able to guide them and to scale them and to basically develop them to engineers that are able to take the company from a startup to a more mature company and hopefully to even more mature company later on. So again, my best advice is if you can go with references, of course, but interviews are not the face of everything. Everybody puts their best show for interviews, especially in a remote environment, and we are remote first. So, and today the advantage of remote environment, that's the disadvantage, right, of remote environment. Everybody's remote, you don't know what they're doing. That's why I think these 3 months of contracting is super important that you see what they're doing, how they interact with the team. Are they able to work remote? The advantage there, on the flip side, the advantage of remote is we are not limited to a specific geographical area talent pool. I found I have my web developers are from Brazil, my PM is from California, my developer is from Florida, I'm from Texas. So we're not limited to a single point of resource pool, so we can, I hope get the best, and also price wise, we can search what for like we can search for developers in our price range as well, right? If we take the Bay Area, which is the most expensive, to I don't know, South in Arkansas, which will probably be the cheapest. And again, I'm just guessing. No offense to anybody from Arkansas. Um, I love Arkansas, but you're able to shop as well. Yes, sometimes you get maybe less good talent, but most of the time it's not about the talent; it's about the price and finding the right talent. So if you have the patience and you're willing to try, you'll find a good talent there.
So, with the team being all remote like that, what are some of the challenges uh, to managing a remote team like that? We're all remote as well, so I get that. But I'd kind of like to hear your experience in that. What challenges have you run into having a fully remote team like
Whiteboard. I miss the whiteboard.
that? Oh man,
Really, whiteboard is king. Like anybody who tells you otherwise and tells, yeah, you have all this digital Zoom board. No,
yeah.
whiteboard is king because you're able to think as you go. And yes, there are digital solutions, but I like to hold the pen. But yeah, to be serious, I think the basic challenge is to it's the availability, right? So when you walk in an office and you walk on the floor or in the cubicles or whatever the setting of the office is, you see each other. You're able to stand up for a second, look beyond my shoulder, see if I'm busy, and ask me for help or ask anybody else for help. There is some you can able to, hey, I have an issue. What do you think? Did you ever encounter that? And somebody probably will pick it up and you'll be able to converse about it. And in today, in the remote environment, it's a bit harder, right? You need people that are able to work more independently. They can't just select me every time they have an issue because it's a distraction, right? It's a disruption for process they have, and they don't know where I am, right? They can't assess is I busy, is he not busy, is he in a meeting, is not in a meeting. You can't assess by looking at the person because you don't see him. So you need people who are able to work independently, and you need to have people who are able to push information to you rather than me pulling. I'm calling it, am I there? Are we there yet? Like Bart Simpson with Homer, are we there yet? Are we there? I don't want to be Bart Simpson. And I always give this example to my team. If I'm becoming Bart Simpson, something doesn't work.
I
I need
like
to know what's going on. I don't need micromanagement. I don't need to know what you're doing every minute. But if you have an assignment and you give me the estimate and I trust you do it in 3 days, raise a flag if you can. Ask the questions if you don't know. Don't ask, don't let me Google it for you as well. Google it yourself. So you need more mature people. And where it's a bit hard is when you're taking students or interns and you need also to develop them. I think that's the hardest part of remote. When you have more mature engineers, usually they're okay. But when we had an intern, which we had to put a lot of resources, that's harder. Again, they need to be mature, mentally mature to be able to work alone and not to sit and in front of a computer screen and say, I'm stuck. I'll reach out to you in 2 hours. Up until then, I'll watch YouTube or something.
right. Well, I got to tell you, I'm 100% with you on that whiteboard. Uh, I mean, yeah, I was really addicted to the whiteboard.
Yeah, again, I think it's the best
100%.
tool.
At one of our, when I was with Enable Midstream, they actually put a whiteboard out. So someone designed the new offices, right, and decided, oh, well, you don't need any whiteboards. And I said, what are you talking about? We don't need whiteboards. Well, about 2 years later, they finally put up a whiteboard for me because I kept complaining about it. And yeah, they actually put my name on it and everything. So that was a while ago, and I was always envious. So down in the training rooms at Chesapeake, uh, we went down there a couple of times, and wall to wall. I mean, from the top of the ceiling to the floor was whiteboard, all four walls. You could walk around there and draw the whole thing out. It was that was like heaven. So I do.
Yeah, I remember pre-COVID, we can also write on the doors
Yeah.
and
Oh
stuff like
wow.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've done that with glass doors. Yeah. Right. So I'm 100% with you. So Arik, what about talk to me about the project management aspect? I know you said you had a project manager on your team. Um, how important do you think that is? I know a lot of places that have small teams like that just forego project management. But why did you find that valuable to have a project manager in place for your team?
So I think it's especially in insurance, the product is so far off from technology. When insurance people think about the product, the last thing they think about is insurance because insurance is a product by itself. You develop a product in insurance, it has nothing to do with tech. Nothing. It doesn't even. It's almost impossible to translate it into tech immediately. You need someone in the middle that's able to understand how to break it into small units because they don't do it. They give you, here you go, here are the forms, here's the underwriting, here's the rater, here's everything. Please develop it for me. They don't understand UX and they don't understand agents behavior and they don't understand a lot of things that this is where product manager is crucial. Now, dev, I'll take the both ends. Dev also don't understand insurance. They don't understand most of them don't understand UX. The good one, yeah, the web developers. But backend, for instance, they don't understand UX and everything. For sure, they don't understand agent behavior unless you have a lot of experience in that domain and how insurance work. Because insurance works a bit differently than the end-to-day consumer product. It's a different animal. So this is where product manager, I think, who knows insurance, it doesn't have to, but at least knows tech, knows one of the ends, able to come and say, okay, let's start breaking into features. Let's manage the board. Let's manage everything so developers won't have to do that. Because when developers start spending a lot of time on the product arena, they don't do the job they were hired to do. And everything get delayed because when you think about it, when they do the PM and they do the code and they do the QA, who's checking what's in the middle? Basically, they control the entire life cycle. It's like the engineer will create the architecture, will build it, and will also make sure it's the building is okay and goes through all the standards and compliances. No industry would accept that because it doesn't exist. Such people don't exist, unfortunately. It's like saying full stack developers. I think there are full stack developers. Don't get me wrong. 99% of people are not. They might know web, they might know backend, but they're good at one of them. They're not experts on both. Most of them, yes, there are people who are you know, I vow to them, but they are amazing. But most of the
Yeah,
developers
it's
are
an
not.
exception to the rule, right? Yeah, I
Yes,
would
there are always
agree with that.
exceptions to the rules.
Yeah,
So the moment you need developers to go to talk to insurance people, that's where confusion starts because they don't speak the same language. Period. I can do without QA and I'm doing well without QA, which I don't like, but it's a necessity because, again, I don't have endless cash in my piggy bank. But without PM, I wouldn't like, I can fill the PM role because I know insurance and I know tech, so I can fill that gap. But if I fill that gap, I don't do other stuff which are important. And at some point, it's becoming full-time work. When you have when Dell's now building a third product and soon to build a fourth product, it's becoming a full-time job. If you go into the trenches, you won't be able to lead anymore, right? You're fighting with the troops. It's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, the general needs to get out of the trenches and see the battlefield and see, okay, what do we need not in this battlefield, but what is required for the next one and the next one, and get the resources and get all the deployments. And again, I'm taking military examples because maybe I'm Israeli, but you know what I mean. You need to plan 3 steps ahead. It's chess, not checkers. So I think PM in the insurance tech world is critical. And again, I don't need him to be an insurance specialist. I don't need him to be a tech specialist. I need him to talk tech a bit, and I need him to be able to learn insurance and understand, and I can help guide him. If you have a CTO or a developer or an engineering manager that doesn't know insurance well, then you need a better someone who knows a bit insurance on the product side. At Hippo, when I started, we had an amazing head of product. Don't tell him I said that because it'll go into his head. But he was amazing in translating this. He was from LinkedIn, so he knew tech. You know LinkedIn way before even Microsoft bought them, and he learned insurance as he went along, and that was fine because at least he knew one aspect very well, and he learned as he go well the insurance aspect. Developers, all the way to when I left Hippo, they knew some insurance, but they were still super confused about stuff.
hmm hmm So this is the fun part. This is the fun question. What about the future? So what do you see coming down the pike? I mean, I know you guys are already really deep, as you've already described, about AI and language models and so forth, and your data science team very involved there. But beyond what you're doing today, what do you see in the future as it pertains to technology? How's that going to change the game for you, or what new initiatives are you looking to start to leverage new technology?
So I think part of the insurance industry, which is going on the surplus lines, which is going to change and help both businesses and homeowners, is resiliency. We all know that climate changes. Now, again, I'm not going into why and how. This is a political argument, and I'm staying away from it. But something changes. Again, it might be because this is our time, some things to change. It might be because humans are involved. I don't know. Fact, something changes again. So there's more droughts, more monsoon rains, there are more fires, more tornadoes like we had right in Texas. We had in Houston and all kind, and in Dallas we had in Houston a big storm that was local, started here in Texas, and in Dallas and Oklahoma and other parts we had devastating tornadoes. Um, so things are changing, and the industry, the insurance industry, cannot adapt fast enough. It's the nature of the beast. It's been here for 200 years. It's slow to change. And this is exactly where Insuretech, and especially in the unadmitted market, which doesn't have to get approvals for every step we make on the data sources. We don't have just to take NOAA data or NASA data or whatever. We can say, okay, this is an amazing data source. Let's use it, both public and private. So I think the Insuretech is the one, probably the unadmitted Insuretech is the one to lead and help the insurance industry to guide through this climatic chaos, I would say. And we see a rise in climate tech industry. We see more predictive models with different companies that are raising here and funding. And I think climate tech today is a very popular term, and a lot of money is being raised there. And there is a reason for it. And I think once insurance and insurtech specifically will take advantage of that and start getting more models and be able to create more predictive, create to predict the able to predict more disasters, and not just on fire. Think about other domains that affected
Floods,
by
yeah,
exactly, you name it. There are enough of them. Floods, winds, heat, cold, whatever you can think about, right? Everybody knows it. It's not a secret that some places are colder than before, some places are hotter than before. Take for example, South California. We had the atmospheric river. I think it's a new term that was invented this year or last year. There was never an atmospheric river term. We had so much rain in South California that people say, yeah, there won't be any fires there. But our model actually predicts that there might be a bit more fires there. And the reason is because there's so much rain, there was so much rain there that there was so much vegetation suddenly grew in areas that didn't have vegetation. So when the summer is hitting now in Southern California, which is a desert. Most of Southern California is a desert, outside the coastal areas, and these things will dry in a second. And dried plants are fuel. Sun, heat, fuel. Here you go. That's a perfect storm. So things are, and these are areas that before that never were in the wildfire arena because they didn't have vegetation and the fuel to nurture this kind of behavior. And you can look at it everywhere, right? So I think the future is for InsureTech to help mitigate the climate with the climate tech, mitigate the risk of climate for insurance, and able to price it better, to underwrite it better, and to provide consumer with solutions which now really lacking in the industry. It's the first time I think I read an article I think a week ago that it's the first time that insurance is affecting the housing market because either they can't get insurance or it's so expensive that they're going, okay, if I buy a house, I need to pay $1,000 mortgage, 500 property, and $2,000 insurance. Hell, I don't have the money for $2,000 insurance. I can't buy the house.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a huge factor anymore. I know our insurance just keeps going up and up and up every year. So anything that you can do uh, from the data perspective to help the insurance companies figure that out, I know everyone's going to be grateful for that. Arik, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight. It's been great. And before we go, tell us how our audience can keep track of what's going on with you and with Delco there.
Yeah, so there's my LinkedIn page, and there's the Delos LinkedIn page. And I think overall there are a lot of, again, you'll see publications and stuff like that, but mainly it's looking for the companies, the insurtech companies that are growing and partnerships. And I'm also, I'm also, the all kind of conventions that I'm participating, ITC and Insuretech New York and other ones that are super interesting because you can see the development of climate tech in these conventions. So and I think this domain for me, it's super, super interesting. I never dreamed of growing up and being in the insurance industry. It's not exactly a child's dream, but I found myself in the last 8 years there, and I'm not regretting a single second.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, to our audience, if you have any questions about anything we've talked about, be sure to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's a great way to get a hold of me. And we'd love to help you out here at Emphasis Tech. We can be sure to help you, especially with all this data like what Arik's talking about. So take care. Until next time, we'll see you then.